So just to get the panel started, I was hoping if everyone could just describe, their role at their companies or the kind of work they're based in to the audience. Starting with you, Tohru.
Sure. I usually work as a writer, director, and producer. A movie just came out in theaters a couple months ago, Rental Family. Now we're going around the... Oh, thanks. Thank you. So that's what I do. Sit in the darkness until I have to go on set.
We're grateful for it. My name is Geneva Wasserman. I work at Dentsu. I am a film and television development and investment executive. I'm the global EVP for our Dentsu Entertainment division.
Hi, my name is Tohru Iokibe. I'm a fan of Rental Family. And I work on behalf of Sony Corporate to focus on the collaboration between PlayStation and Sony Pictures in adapting PlayStation video games into movies and TV shows. Thank you for having us.
So first off, I wanted to start by congratulating you, Hikari, for Rental Family being longlisted in the BAFTAs for Best Director and Best Non-English Language Film.
Thank you. I know,
Yeah. Could you tell us, what was your motivation for wanting to do a film set in Japan, but from the perspective of an American character?
Yeah, sure. I think as a writer, director, and having all this very different life experience up to this point when I started U.S film school in my early 30s, I always curious what I can do as a creator to make this place a little bit better place having people understand our cultures, the differences, right? How can we make this world, even though it feels like it's crazy right now out there, how can we create unify this world? And for me, it was important to tell a story that is bringing these two cultures together. And then also, when I first came to America, I lived in Utah as an exchange student. And I was the only Asian girl in the room. And that whole experience, first, it felt a bit of isolation. And obviously, some people never seen any Asian person in their lives. And this is in the 90s. So I know it's kind of crazy. But it was the environments I was thrown into. But during that experience, I was able to connect with so many incredible, amazing people, friends, my host family, that now I'm still to this day I'm friends with. And that relationship I was able to create, I truly found that the family is not just the one we're relating to, but and also people who are you're connected to as a friend, right? People you work with, you go to school with, those all become your family. And that idea I wanted to bring into my Rental Family story. That was kind of like original idea, why I wanted to put Brendan Fraser's character to be in Japan.
So Geneva, can you tell us what really distinguishes Dentsu from other companies that are working in the brand-supported content space?
That's a great question. I think Dentsu is very unique. We view brand-supported content as an integrated growth engine and not just as like a tactic. I think a lot of people think in isolation around storytelling, and we look at storytelling, whether a brand's involved or not involved, exactly the same way, right? Telling a great story and having a strategy that connects beyond just one data point. We also are, as you may know, if you know Dentsu, we are a very diversified business, and so we lean into all of our different divisions for data, audience insights, customer behaviors, and apply that in a larger, I would say, more intentional strategy than you would see almost anywhere else.
And Tohru, what aspects of PlayStation IP coming out of Japan really stand out to Sony with respect to adapting IP for multiple mediums?
Right. So, we have over 100 titles that we are dealing with. And so far, we've made 3 movies and 2 TV series. Movie space-wise, Uncharted, Gran Turismo, Until Dawn, and for TV series, Twisted Metal, and some of you may know HBO's The Last of Us. Of all the IPs that we have about over 10 projects in the pipeline. And for those in the pipeline, there's one project that really crosses over all of the resources and talents across the Sony group, which is a video game called Ghost of Tsushima. The video game takes place in the 1200s in Japan, feudal Japan, and it's about the samurai warrior who fights against foreign invasion to defend the island of Tsushima. So that's the story. Now, this game, you might think it was made in Japan, but it was produced by a video game studio on the PlayStation in Seattle. And it became a world hit, including Japan. So we're taking that IP and we're making 2 things. One is we are making a live action feature at Sony Pictures Entertainment in the U.S. And also we are making a Japanese anime series with Sony's anime studio called Aniplex, who produced Demon Slayer, as you might know. Once the anime series is done, we'll be streaming on Sony's owned anime streaming platform called Crunchyroll. So this IP is, for us, it's like a perfect scenario where all the pieces of Sony's expertise and talent lines up well. And we're definitely maximizing that so that we can reach as many people as possible. Not every IP works well like this, but if there are IPs that work, we will definitely exploit it like that.
So Hikari, Rental Family is set in Japan, but is actually an American production by way of Searchlight Pictures at Disney. How does the actual Japanese film market differ from the one here?
Wow. Okay. What part do you want to know? I'm just kidding. For this one was because I was based here and I wanted to, team up with studios in the United States, and it just kind of became naturally talking to different studio heads and studios, period. And we end up working with Searchlight. But the difference is, and someday maybe in, I don't know, 100 years, maybe will change to the way I would like to hope in Japan. The difference is that the studio in the United States is, there's a people like me, the creative head, right? Like you write, you pitch the idea, you write a script, you pitch the story, and then they said, okay, great, we'll make the story. And before we get to the place, we have a producers that they also team up with me. This process for us, I'll just explain this. The process was, we had an idea during the pandemic, and we developed it. And then once we got the really solid outline, I spoke to the producers, and there's many producers and the production companies in the States. There's A24 to Annapurna to all these great teams. And then I ended up working with Sight Unseen. We developed a script together. And then it took a little bit because during the pandemic, I also got a job to work on Beef and Tokyo Vice and different projects. So I jumped on to do that and then came back, finished the script, and then it was time for us to pitch to the studio. So we pitched to Searchlight and a couple other ones, and we ended up going with Searchlight. And then we went to production, right? And now Searchlight at this point is handshake, we're gonna distribute your movie worldwide through Searchlight platforms around the world, in theaters, and then also end up being Disney. In Japan, it quite doesn't work that way. Larger studios, there's the main 3 studios, one of which is the biggest one, is they basically is a mammoth, right? Big corporation that they have in-house producers that work on salary, and they also work with creatives. But then they are basically I'll be hired to write a script or have a script, and then we'll develop it. And then the production company is the studio. They make the production, just like Searchlight did. And then just like Searchlight did, they do the distribution. And the difference is that when we have the creative ideas, sometimes because I'm speaking, I never made a movie in Japan before with the studios, but just because I have some friends who works in the studio system, you write and then sometimes basically you write gears towards what the studio is looking for. And oftentimes my friends would say, well, I have ideas, but then that's not what the studio is looking for. And then I guess similar here too. So you do that. And then it was as far as the sorry, as far as once the movie's done, here you can dream a little bit. For example, there's a back-end deal, there's this deal, there's a point or something that we all kind of hope to have so that we all can live once the movie's successful, we can share the wealth. That doesn't happen in Japan. So the major studios who owns also theaters in Japan, which I find it a little bit problematic sometimes. And in America, that's legal. So there's no AMC making movies, right? But then there's a studio making movies in Japan. And sometimes those major studio also owns the lands. So they become, they're getting a rent from their own company. So they're just basically banking all this money, right? But the sad part is that doesn't just stays in that company. It doesn't trickle down to producers or writers or directors. It just kind of stay. And so a lot of my friends who works major movies, making millions of animation to this, and I would be like, what was your end result? And they'd give me a number. I'm like, I'm just, what? Like, you spend they made $200 million and you're making how much, right? So I hope someday that the big studios will be open enough and generous enough to help artists so that we can continue to create the art that we deserve and not to be the part of the machine because we have voices and we have to tell stories. So, yeah.
Are there,
I hope, knock on wood.
Are there any distributors that stand out to you as having done, distributors on in Western countries that stand out to you as having done a good time bringing Japanese film to global audiences?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of studios really enjoy, distributing, right? Because in Japan, a lot of times they make animations to, live action, and it's hard for live action to come across to the States because a lot of them are Japanese language, and there's something about the Japanese filmmaking doesn't sometimes resonate to Western audience. So, but I think especially animation, or IP project that does come to the United States or Europe, and yeah, there's a lot of great success in that, and then I hope it will continue. But I'm hoping that because I think there's a lot of incredible ideas and stories that exist in Japan, my hope in the next couple of years or starting this year is to really educate the Japanese filmmakers how to go across the ocean, get out of Japan, and that your work can be seen around the world. But for that, you need a little bit of different way of approaching the storytelling. So I'm hoping to do that, and then also educate the kids who needs support in arts. So that's my goal.
Geneva, similar to what Tohru does at Sony, bringing gaming IP to other mediums, has Dentsu ever done anything, in that realm as well?
I'm so glad you asked. We have a movie coming out December 23rd of this year that is, I'm going to make a controversial statement that, you know what it is. It is Japanese IP by virtue of acquisition. So Sega acquired Rovio a couple of years ago, and we are producing and helping to market and distribute Angry Birds' third film, Angry Birds Movie 3. But as you may know, Dentsu is very involved in the Japanese film market, in manga and anime, and what we're seeing is a lot of interest in adaptation in both directions. what a lot of people don't know is Dentsu actually has not only an entertainment team, but we have a sports and a gaming dedicated specialists divisions. And so we're seeing a lot of Japanese IP going across transmedia, not just into film and TV, but also in other directions, into anime, into gaming. I think we're going to start seeing, which I was always sort of surprised, like why doesn't Attack on Titan have a video game? I mean, that just feels, and maybe it will very soon. So we're involved in a lot of IP adaptation. I think gaming and particularly independent gaming is going to see more and more adaptation as it becomes more popular. And just like in creator marketplaces and narrative storytelling, we're seeing that happen in gaming as well. So it's very much part of my everyday.
What kind of titles at Dentsu really stand out, from your perspective as being particularly translatable to other mediums versus, the one they originated from?
I think it's pretty broad, but shonen seems to be in high demand right now for translation, just because visually it's very exciting. I'm looking forward to the day when we see some of the more layered and nuanced, more emotionally driven storytelling be adapted. But I think shonen is probably the number one if I had to choose like a subgenre.
Tohru, you specified earlier that Ghost of Tsushima is actually made at an American gaming studio. Between IP at PlayStation and more broadly Sony, that is either coming from Western countries or Japan itself, are there any sort of key storytelling trends or differences you've observed in, games depending on where they come from?
It's very difficult to come with a general statement about Western versus Japanese narrative. But maybe I can give an example that would give you a glimpse into how we consider adaptation by this example. So, as I mentioned, we made 3 movies so far, and one of them is based on a video game called Gran Turismo. And that's a racing game with no story. There's no narrative. It's just a game, a racing game. But the DNA of the game is in its detail to accuracy and immersion and the visceral feel that you get when you're playing the video game. So this is an extreme example. So we have a game like that. We have with a DNA that's very detailed and meticulous in an old school way, like very Japanese, in terms of like post-war industrial trends and stuff. So with that story, with that IP, we decided to choose a path of adaptation of the based on a true story path. So we have a realistic video game. We chose the adaptation path of based on a true story. And the true story is there is actually a person, a video gamer, who was one of the world champions of the PlayStation Gran Turismo video game. He eventually gets trained to become a real racer to be competing in the Le Mans 24-hour race, and he came in 3rd. And that's a true story. Right? It's just incredible. So with an IP like that, there's no story, but there is a DNA, there's an essence of an IP that everyone recognizes. We chose that true story because it reflected the authenticity of the DNA of the original game. And then to make an actual movie out of it, the director, producer, everyone really focused on how realistic can we make it. So in that process, I reached out to, Sony creates cinema cameras that you use to shoot movies. So we reached out to them and said, this is a movie we're making based on a Gran Turismo game. We want it to be real, visceral as much as possible. What type of camera are you developing that you can help us shoot this movie to bring that feel to the big screen? So they sent us a bunch of prototypes and one of them was, so cinema camera is about like this big. And it's too big to fit in a racing car's cockpit to shoot an actor driving the car at 200 miles per hour. So the camera team developed a tool that would disconnect the body from the sensor, the lens. So you tuck the body of the camera in the back seat, and you just have the lens part. You mount it on the dashboard of the cockpit because it's very small, but it's the same camera. It's the same cinema camera that you shoot every other scene with. With that, we can really have the car go 200 miles per hour with the actor inside actually acting, and you can shoot it without green screen or VFX. So that's just one example of, there could be an IP where there is no story, but there's an essence to it, and you have various ways to adapt that into a movie. We chose like a true story path, and we brought technology that would allow you to execute that type of like visceral cinematic executions onto the big screen. So I think there's a lot of IP that would come from Japan across like video games and anime. But if you really focus on the essence of the DNA of the IP, I think it gives you various ways to adapt into a really good cinema experience, and using technology and great creators like Hikari-san to the big screen.
That's like, it's so inspiring, That's like, I never heard that before. I didn't know, even though I'm sorry, I don't play games, but in life either, I don't play games. But that's like, the story like that, like if I hear, somebody from the studio pitched me that idea, I'd be like, oh my God, there's such a great story. How can we execute, right? I can't wait to see that movie, yeah.
I've seen that movie. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to open up, your point about some of the technology involved in expanding these stories to the rest of the panel, and just ask, how do you think technology is evolving successfully to tell really nuanced stories that bridge the gap between, countries and their own respective markets?
I think the streaming phenomenon has really brought more content than I could ever imagine, right, to be accessible. And in doing so, opened up our aperture wider than just thinking about Japanese content or IP from a specific lens, and looking more broadly. So I think that will continue to help, find new audiences for Japanese, creators, storytellers, filmmakers, hopefully. I have other thoughts on streaming that are not as positive, but in terms of one good thing about streaming is that technology has enabled us to have access to more titles than ever.
Expanding on that point, actually, what are the pros and cons of streaming with regard to, the benefit it has in bringing, global content out to the world stage, wherever people can find it, but also, the fact that sometimes something that starts the streaming first runs the risk of really getting lost in the noise and content carousels and things like that. That's something everyone can chime in on.
I feel like, there's the pros of streaming is the access, and then the cons are getting lost in the sauce of too much content, but also the business models, right? Direct to consumer has really changed how directors, producers, actors, artists, below the line, above the line, are compensated, and have really also led into this sort of era of consolidation that we're seeing now. So I think for all of the good for the access, I'm hoping that, streamers will support movie theaters and, art, and not just rely on an algorithm to reach an audience, which is odd for me because I always talk about connecting audience to culture. But, it's a fine line.
I can jump on this one. I think pros for me is that once I put the movie out there, people can watch it anywhere in the world, right? If I have a specific message I want to put, to share, the ideas or how we see the world individually, and for that I'm like so grateful that the people get to just watch it. People from Brazil or a little town in Italy who can't get to the theater, they can watch it in different platforms. That I'm really happy about. And going back to the cons part is, as a creator, we are constantly if there's so much that they made, the studio system, right, or network, Netflix, there's so many of them, the streaming service, they are always, one year they're like, we need all these television ideas, pitch to us. So you pitch everything. This is like several years ago. And then they just mass-made television show. And then suddenly people are not watching it, so that the budget drops. And then when you actually have a really good story, great story, then they're already, we don't have a budget for it, so we cannot make it. And once we as a creator, we spend years of developing this story, and then you perhaps have one chance, maybe second one, a few years later or decade later. But then because of there's so many contents being made, our voice has been kind of lost in a way. The studio, they may want to make it, but they just can't because there's no more finance. And then oftentimes is that you pitch studio and the networks, and then the executive is so interested and they're so happy to make it, yet people switch so much. Next thing I know is like, oh, I thought that what happened to the executive? Oh, she or he got let go. And now we have a brand new team. So even though you created or developed for 4 or 5 years with a passionate team, as soon as they disappear, you're back to zero because those people are no longer interested in your project. And for us, it's because of it's just so many contents that they're trying to create. We're trying to figure out what is the story that we believe in, that even though those people may have gone, can you guys promise us to continue to make it? And sometimes it happens too. But I think the majority of times it's very challenging for us to stick around.
I have a canned soundbite. We love those, right? Yeah. So I don't know why I have this, but I wrote it for somebody. So the scale comes at the expense of ownership, pricing power, and long-term value creation, and they function as closed ecosystems, right? Which is what I was alluding to before. So here's my soundbite. Global streamers are phenomenal distribution partners, but not always ideal business partners.
Yeah. Oh, that's well said.
I'm cheating.
Well, speaking to sort of the closedness of these ecosystems sometimes, we do see companies experimenting with this. Last summer, for instance, Netflix took K-pop Demon Hunters and put it back in theaters for a weekend where it actually finished at #1. Granted, it was late August, so not the most competitive time of the year at the cinemas, but still a notable shift from this notion that something starts in streaming and ends in streaming. Do you all expect, or at least hopeful, that there can continue to be experimenting like that with the streaming ecosystem, as a means of building hype for a project, outside of something like theaters before figuring out if there's a way to get it back in theaters?
I think if you guys ever watch a movie in theaters, theater is like a collective experience. If you're watching flipping channels on your, flipping channels. How old I am now.
This is how you flip channels.
Right, exactly. You're swiping channels, whatever you want to call it. You're just you and the camera, or you and the monitor or television. And it's definitely, you can save money if you have a big family, because going to the cinema is so expensive nowadays. But if you go there, the amount of, you would be surprised how much the experience that the life that you actually get to spend is 2 hours that you're locked in, you can't go anywhere, you're in the darkness with a group of people you don't know. but yet you're experiencing the same thing. And that experience I would love to share. And then I'm so glad that the Demon Slayer went out there, because the kids, I mean, everybody just went crazy over it because of the collective experience. And I really hope that, you know, now Netflix acquiring perhaps Warner Brothers, and they're trying to, you know, continue to bring the cinema theater models, and us as a filmmakers too, just continue to create the story that everybody can come together and watch it, so that you guys all can experience. Like, for example, Rental Family, it's a small movie. I can't even tell you how much it was. It was very small budget. But when I went to check out the cinema, I see a lot of people coming in alone. Like, there's like a man in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and then there's a couple people, there's an older woman, and then once it was done, people just like struck the conversation. I sat in the back and I just watched everybody, and, you know, after they taking a deep and, you know, reflecting, and then I just started hearing whispering, and then I also heard clapping their hands once the movie, you know, was ended. And that was, for me, it was like amazing experience itself, and I'm so glad that those audience were able to spend that time with strangers and talk about movie, but not just the movie, but also life. So I hope that the people continue to go to the cinema.
Maybe just adding a tiny anecdote to that point. I can't remember where I read it, but I think there was some essayist who was talking about the experience, like a live action experience, versus watching something on TV. And he was explaining that for a child, the hug that the child gets with Mickey Mouse at Disneyland is going to be 100 times stronger than the kid watching the same thing on TV. It's so that experience of getting a hug is going to be in the child's brain, in their heart for a very long time. And I think going to the cinema is like that. It's an experience, right? You're watching something, but you're having this communal experience, and that would stay with you. And when I look back in my childhood, my father was like would take us to every year or every other year when the new James Bond movie comes out. We would go as a family. I don't know why, but the whole family would go and see it, and it became like a memory, and it's a family thing. So hopefully, you know, people would appreciate going to the cinema like that, and, you know, build memories in their lives as a community.
I still think it's the most affordable sort of in real life entertainment. I was trying to think of what is a better deal, you know? And I think that it is, I love that point. It's a different experience of seeing something conversational and not being so isolated and alone. I think hopefully I'm hearing that the trends with Gen Z and Gen Alpha are they're looking for in real life. They're looking for analog all of a sudden. Experiences, and so hopefully, you know, the pendulum will just kind of bring us back to that human experience of shared, you know, experience. Yeah. I used experience 3 times.
Oh, okay. No, that's cool.
I win.
Yeah.
Hikari, how did you pitch Rental Family, like keeping in mind, you know, the fact that you knew you wanted that for theater specifically?
How did I pitch? Wow, that was a long time ago. Well, first they were really interested in about the subject matter, right? The rental family, what does that even mean? And that was exactly my reaction to when I first heard it. Like, what is rental family? Like, you rent people? Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? But then there is a lot of much more human story beyond it. People, when it's like, oh, rental family, it's a comedy. But it's actually not. It's a very deep, emotional story. And it's not what because I wrote it, the business itself is very deep, because people are looking for connections. You know, people are looking for somebody to be there for them, even though you're paying for the hour, because there's the isolation, one technology, swiping left and right, and in a big city like Tokyo, people just don't connect. So for me, that was kind of an idea of a way to pitch. Like, we're all alone in the world. Like, there's, sure, you have partners, there's somebody you take care of or you're connected to, But then we as an individual were born to be here to do whatever we are supposed to do in this life. And so for me, it was, what if all these strangers come together and they create this community? And they all come, the individual have a different opinions, different ideas, what the life should be, or what the life they want. But what if we collectively come together, strangers, create this harmony of a family? Because, like I said, when I was writing the story, it was during the pandemic. And you remember, we didn't know where we're going. You know, it was like, are we ever going to go back to school? Are we ever going to go back to work? You know, there's that a chunk of a year that people are so lost. And that was the time that I felt like, in case, I hope, I know, we'll go back to what it was someday. But even though we don't, what does it look like if we were to create the story that bring people together, regardless of our genders, what the background is, our ethnicity? So that was kind of way of just us pitching to the studio, and then Searchlight folks, Matthew Greenfield, the CEO, and then all the entire team, they just were like, we love it. We want to make it right away. So it was quite. We actually reached to like 7 different production company when we're pitching the ideas, and they all wanted to make it. So we knew that once we have a script, we'll be landing on the good hands. So we're just, you know, but you never know. So you keep believing things gonna happen, and you energetically take it to that place.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Demon Slayer earlier, the anime franchise. The latest film, Infinity Castle, was the top-grossing film from Sony Pictures this year. I believe it made over 700 million globally, and I think that's actually the best anime film at the box office ever, if I remember correctly. You know, anime is not a new thing by any means. You know, Akira is decades old at this point. Miyazaki films have been around for a very long time. Why is it suddenly, you know, popping off in such a, you know, market-dominating aspect this year in particular? What about it has allowed it not only to endure for as long as it has been, but really just pop out in this year alone?
Okay. I'm happy. I think that a couple of things. One, anime is this global ecosystem of storytelling. It's not like a genre, and there's so much different types of storytelling that happen within that medium, and it's all authentic, right? So there's world building as part of the process of, you know, no matter what type or style of anime it might be, it's authentic, it's layered, it's intentional. It just feels effortless in transmedia because it's so rich. And I think it really comes down to you're creating entire, you know, it's like a franchise mindset because you're being so authentic in originality. And I think we've lost some of that, or at least young people are looking for that. So the driving generations, and I'm a huge anime fan and I'm Gen X, but Gen Z really, when they had access to more and more anime through global streaming platforms, especially during COVID, it became something that was sought out, and there's so much. So, you know, it's not something that you can watch every anime. It's an entire universe. So I think it comes down to just the authenticity of it.
I grew up watching like Hayao Miyazaki's television animation. If you're Japanese, there's Haha wo tazuneta sanzenri, 3,000 miles to look in search of your mother. I always love the family stories. And then those are the television animation that the Studio Ghibli, before they were Studio Ghibli, the whole entire team put it on the television. It's like 25 minutes long, and they were just like heart-wrenching, but it's so dramatic. And I doubt that's something that I grew up. I started watching when I was 3. Maybe that's why I like family stories. But then when Hayao Miyazaki's, you know, the first movie was Nausicaa, of the Valley of the Wind. That was my favorite movie to this day, of all time. Because me as a child, sitting in we're working class family, so we didn't get a luxury to go to the cinema, but watching on this little television when it came out on television, I was just my world just went like, what is this? a girl, a hero, she's the lead, right? And then she can fly and she can save her community. Like, that's what I want to be. That's who I want to be. And literally to this day, I still think about that. That experience is, especially for kids, you can watch it continuously and they can give you a different perspective in life, because this is, we all know. Live action video, we all know. The kids also know that, but then animation is it's a whole different creativity that the people don't realize. And you can do so much with it. So, yeah, I love anime too.
Tohru, you mentioned earlier that Ghost of Tsushima is being developed both as a live action film, but also as an anime series, I believe. Obviously, you can't give anything away with respect to what either is going to look like, but at a broad level, what are the important things to keep in mind when expanding IP from a gaming space to two different visual mediums like that? What is going to be more conducive towards live action versus an animated series?
Yes. I think this is true with any type of adaptation projects. But for us, definitely, we are creators first. So we don't impose, like, make this, make that. We would have our doors open and we reach out to creators for their ideas to pitch to us. With Ghost of Tsushima, that one was fairly clean because if you've played the game, there's the main story of the protagonist fighting the foreign invasion. But there's also a mode called Legends mode, which leans more onto the supernatural of like Japanese folklore and stuff. So like Tengu, like things like those will pop up. And the animation studio that Aniplex was discussing with, they said, we have a very specific vision of making an anime series based on the Legends mode. So naturally, it was very simple for us because the live action movie is based on the main story. And the anime studio, their idea was to make the Legends mode, which was a different mode, so it doesn't overlap. And also the creativity that you would need to make the Legends mode is probably, if you make a live action, it would be very, very costly and time consuming. So everything fit in right. The fact that the creator wanted to make that version was good. But I think we have other projects where we are crossing mediums. We just make sure we have close communication so one of the concepts we have with franchise is we don't want to withdraw from a franchise. We want to deposit. So if you're making something, you're borrowing a franchise name to barely make something, then you're not doing a service to the franchise. Or you're withdrawing, you're just borrowing someone's name to make something. But if you're depositing, you're making the franchise bigger and stronger. So that's kind of the principle that we have, is we don't want to just borrow a franchise and make something out of it. We want to add to it, and we want to expand the franchise by depositing value to it, so that the fans would get more out of that.
I think we have just a few more minutes here, so I wanted to open up one or two questions to the audience, if anyone has anything they'd like to ask the panelists here. Sure.
I'm a huge fan of Rental Fan.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, thank you so much. I'll give you a free popcorn next time.
I really love it. I'm one of the older women who go by themselves. But it seemed that there were flashes of other stories that were sort of you saw just barely going by the scene with the little baby and some others. Were there other stories that you could have that you would have included in the full movie if you'd had hours and hours to tell the story?
My first cut was 2 hours and 45 minutes. We wrote many different versions of the scenarios. And then we also shot some of the scenes that we actually sadly had to kill the baby, we call it. We couldn't keep it in the literally. We couldn't keep it in the story. Well, I wouldn't say we couldn't. I consciously decided not to keep those stories. That includes Aiko talking about her sexual abuse as a former actress she used to be, and to her first experience as being a rental, being rented. In the forum, when they have the ramen scene, they talk about it. And those are the stories that I discovered, or I wrote through being inspired from what I wrote and what happened, if that makes sense. If, for example, when I don't know if you guys read this article, when we were doing our research, I found out about this man, and this guy who was on his deathbed. And he had a daughter, long-lost daughter, that he could not reach out, or there's no way to communicate with her. But there's something he wanted to apologize to her of what happened in the past. And because he can reach, he's in his deathbed, so he hired somebody to come to pretend to be the daughter. And in that moment, she sat by the door, by the bed, listened to him. And then he apologized and she accepted it. And he was finally able to let go of all this weight that he kept in his chest for 25, 30 years, right? And then a few days later, he passed away. So story like that I found during the research, and then also when I was doing the interviews, people who use the services, the people who becomes a surrogate, I really wanted to be authentic. So I collect those stories together, and we actually had this really, really amazing story. If the studio allowed me to do 3 hours version, that would be a really good story. But yeah, we in the end, we just focused on Philip's journey. And what I discovered in the editing was that while we have all this beautiful story that I had with the guy who owns the business, he also had a family member, all that story. But then I also wanted the audience to be in somebody's shoes, which will be naturally Brendan Fraser's character, so that the people can experience what is it like to be the guy, right? The only guy, and then really experience the journey with him. So I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question 100%, but yeah, that was, there's a lot of baby I have to go, and it was hard, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
Okay, well, thank you so much for listening to our panel and taking time out of your day to come out to see us.